If the Dolphins indeed do find themselves selling at the trade deadline, what could they potentially get for one of their team captains in Bradley Chubb?
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. I want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins, we're going to be exploring our first name for the trade deadline. And I won't do a bunch of these every week, and the trade deadline's about a month away, right? But these conversations kind of got to start to be happening soon if they're going to come together. And the challenge for Miami, of course, and I said this on yesterday's show during the group therapy session, was the thing that I think has to happen is you have to be prepared with the way that this season has started. This defense, it's not going to get better by buying players mid-season, right? And trading for talent. It's going to get better by your young guys getting opportunities to play and playing better, which means the only way that it's going to get better is by continuing to allow your young guys to play through it. And they have to improve. And as a result, I think the negligent thing to do if you have opportunities to move talent would be to hang on to talent in the name and sake of pursuit of job security, right? Because that's the fear is Mike McDaniel's a head coach on the hot seat. Chris Grier's a general manager on the hot seat. And I don't have the answers for what that is going to look like right now. But I read enough of the comments and I've talked to enough of you guys to know it's Tuesday. Y'all really don't want to talk about Carolina again. So we'll do all the film study stuff over on Touchdown Miami over on Substack. So Touchdown Miami, we'll do a film review for the offense and the defensive side of the ball. I'll put all that over there, and then that way at least you can watch it. If you're into that kind of thing, you can watch it with the film, right, and see how things played out. So that's coming a little later this evening, and then tomorrow we'll get the other one out. Instead, kind of this gap window between finishing week 5 and what happened in week 5 and prepping for week 6 when we have crossover on Thursday with David Drogmeyer of Locked On Chargers. And then we set the roadmap to what beating the Chargers looks like on Friday. And we have our squad show with Jim Grieshaber and Jeff Scanina and myself for an hour live tomorrow, in addition to another show tomorrow. Lots of programming to get you ready for the Chargers. Bradley Chubb felt like a very important piece to touch on because that's the name, as I ask around, media folks at other spots, whether that's my colleagues at A to Z, whether that's at people on the beat for other teams, and they look at the Dolphins roster, pass rush help. Pass rushers get traded in season, and Bradley Chubb obviously is a player who's lived this once already. He got traded from Denver to Miami. He's in a reworked contract year. He's off to a hot start from a sack perspective, not necessarily a pressure perspective, but a sack perspective. He's got 4 sacks this season. That's tied for 9th in the NFL. If a team is going to look at, hey, who's a player that is the right kind of player to add to a locker room mid-season, who has good sack production, where maybe there's some upside as he continues to knock some rust off as he goes throughout the course of the next month of the season, building up to the trade deadline, whenever that actually is. Bradley Chubb is a name that has some interest from people at other spots along the way. And this is not the guarantee that they're going to trade him, but it is a question that's worth asking. And you got to look at Bradley Chubb and his profile as a player, right? Because if the Dolphins keep losing, he's going to be 30 years old next year. And he's going to be owed $43.5 million in compensation for 2026 and 2027. That's not guaranteed in any way, shape, or form. And that's what makes Bradley Chubb the kind of common sense player. If you're going to lose more games and you're going to be about transitioning into whatever the next chapter of this organization looks like, if you can get something for a player like this, it's the exact kind of move that you should make to set yourself up for success and set the table for you to have more assets to work with, and in the process, pay less cash for a player in the here and now while opening the pathway for for your first round pick last year in Chop Robinson to play more snaps, right? That's the thought process. And that's why I think Bradley Chubb, even though he is a team captain, is the right kind of name to invoke. And the fact that he has some of this sack production that he does is helpful. Now, he has 10 pressures on 103 pass rush opportunities this season. That pressure rate ranks outside the top 100 in the NFL, despite the fact that he's tied for ninth in the NFL with Myles Garrett and Trey Hendrickson with 4 sacks through 5 weeks. And you don't have to look any further than the one that he just got against the Panthers, right? He's unblocked off the edge, and Bryce Young just drops the ball. He just literally dropped the ball. And Bradley has a sack and a forced fumble or a fumble recovery as a result. His pressure rate now, after 5 games, is about half the pressure rate of what Jalen Phillips has been able to produce. And Jalen Phillips, at least you can have a conversation, if he stays healthy this season, about a new contract and him being in what should be the prime of his career, even though there's some durability questions. You could have a conversation about a second contract and what that looks like. Whereas Bradley Chubb, age 30, his personal timeline and the financial lingering effects of what has turned into a sour milk style contract that has aged very poorly for the Dolphins. It's just doesn't line up beyond this year, I think, to make sense with the way that the season has unfolded thus far for Miami. And the way that they kind of reassessed that contract this past offseason, they put a lot of the ball in Bradley Chubb's court to earn some of the money back, because he, remember, did take a pay cut to manipulate the salary cap. So what could you get for Bradley Chubb as a player who doesn't make sense for the long-term future of the Dolphins and has non-guaranteed big salaries in future years, which means he's probably going to be a one-year rental for somebody else and has good sack production, but not necessarily good pressure production and the consistency of those two metrics? It gets messy because the Dolphins did do that funny business with Bradley Chubb's contract back in the spring. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Prize Picks. Every day we make decisions, but on Prize Picks, it's right. Being right actually gets you paid. So don't miss the excitement of this football season with Prize Picks, where it is good to be right. Playing Prize Picks is such a fun, simple way to add more excitement to football. You pick more or less on player projections like Josh Allen passing yards or Saquon Barkley rushing for touchdowns, and you are in the game. It's also fun to follow other players in the app and copy their lineups. You could do so with just one click. And the new injury reboot feature, if your player leaves early and does not return, it will not count against you. It's a new feature that changes the game. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. So I wrote this up for A to Z Sports this morning, and it was kind of the inspiration to do this for today's show. Bradley Chubb took a pay cut that converted salary he was owed as guaranteed salary into incentive money, performance incentives. And when they did that deal, he got a signing bonus for a portion of it up front that was then prorated out. And they left him on a minimum veteran salary, which means just the salary portion of this, not the incentive performance incentives, but the salary portion of this. Bradley Chubb is on the books for a $1.225 million base salary for the entirety of the year. So if he got traded halfway through the season, whatever team is trading for Bradley Chubb would only be onboarding like $600,000 in salary. That's going to garner a lot of interest, even if the pressure rate is low, right? It's a one-year rental for $600,000. That's like what the Bills got Amari Cooper for from the Browns when they traded for him in season last year, because the Browns restructured, because they restructure everybody. They restructured Amari Cooper's contract, and then the Bills said, hey, there's no financial implication. This is a minimum salary player for us across the back half of the year to bring in. It makes a lot of sense to move and bring in Amari Cooper. And I want to make sure I get the terms of that right. But because it was such a cheap financial cost to the Bills, and the Browns had foot the bill for his salary, they got a third-round pick and a seventh-round pick. Amari Cooper was traded from Cleveland to Buffalo in October of 2024 for a 2025 third-round pick and a 2026 seventh-round pick. And Amari Cooper went along with a 2025 sixth-round pick back. So a 3 and a pick swap of a 6 and a 7 with Amari Cooper at the core of it. If it was just that for Bradley Chubb, you'd probably be cooking with gas. We could look at it and say, hey, man, you're talking about a 29-year-old, high intangibles, strong leader, strong locker room personality, sell the upside, say, hey, the pressure rate's coming back, but man, the instinctiveness to make the plays as a pass rusher, you're seeing the finishes, right? And the pressure stuff should come back and get back to equilibrium as he plays more. That'd be your sales pitch. And you say, hey, what kind of mid-round pick could we give for Bradley Chubb? But that's not all it is. Here's the incentives package for Bradley Chubb. Every game he's active and dresses for this season, he gets $129,411 bonus because he's active on game day. That was the motivation for the Dolphins when they incentivized the contract and they took the pay cut, was said, we want you to earn it by being on the field. So when you're on the field, we want to guarantee you just missed all of last year. And we paid you for all of it. So now we want to give you the opportunity to play, but we want to make sure that you're on the field to earn your money. So it's up to $2.2 million more. So if you took the same amount of, say he's traded halfway through the season, right before the deadline. Now that base salary is now half of $1.25 million. So let's just make it an even number and call it $600,000. You now have to add another $1.1 million on top of that, assuming he dresses for all the games. That in and of itself might not be a bad thing. You'd say, hey, we can handle $2 million in salary for Bradley Chubb. But there's playtime incentives here for percentage of snaps and also sack production that makes this a very messy conversation. If Bradley Chubb gets 6 sacks this season, he gets a performance incentive that is equal to his salary for the entire year. He gets another $1.225 million with 6 sacks. He has 4 already. What happens if he goes cold for the next 3 weeks and then you trade him? And then the first game out, he's going to get 2. Now that new team's going to be on the hook for another $1.225 million because he hit 6 sacks. But wait, there's another $2.7 million hanging in the balance in sack performance incentives because he gets another $900,000 at 8. He gets another $900,000 at 11. He gets another $900,000 at 13. So in total, you're talking 2.7. It's about $4 million in sack incentives for Bradley Chubb, plus $2.2 million in per active game bonuses. Now, the Dolphins would eat some of that because he played half the games for Miami, just like they'd eat some of the base salary. But if he comes out and even if the pressure rate's not high, if he keeps rolling in the sacks like this, he's going to max out. I'm not going to say he's going to hit 13 on the season, but he'd probably get another $2 million just in sack incentives. But wait, there's more. There's also playtime incentives for percentage of snaps played. If Bradley Chubb plays 60% of the snaps on the season, he gets another $1.225 million in performance incentives. If he goes up to 65% of the snaps across the entirety of the season for the games that he plays, he gets an additional $900,000 in performance incentives. If it's 70%, he gets an additional $900,000. If it goes to 75%, it's an additional $900,000. So you've got like $4 million in playtime incentives, an additional $4 million in sack incentives, an additional $2.2 million in per game active bonuses that go along with that one half of $1.2 million base salary. That makes this all very messy. It makes it very difficult for a team to look at Bradley Chubb because it's no longer just saying, hey, we're going to bring this guy in for $600,000 in the equivalent of a veteran minimum salary to bring in at the trade deadline. So let's talk what kind of mid-round pick you want to send. The financial implications here, unless the Dolphins are going to eat significant portions of it, and maybe that can be a part of the negotiation, and say, look, we'll pay out. We've obviously already paid out the salary. We've already obviously paid out the per game active bonuses that he's dressed. So the base with the per game active bonuses and the base salary, you're talking $1.75 million. I'm just going to use round numbers. And all these incentives hanging in the balance. I don't know what that conversation looks like. Is that we take whatever he earns, we take a prorated amount that he played with Miami and mitigate the cost to you. But I mean, you're talking about a max value of about another $8 million. So now you're buying a draft pick, but now the salary's not low, where even if he maxed it out and you ate $4 million, the team that's bringing him on needs like $6 million in cash now. It's not expensive, but it's not cheap. And that's the whole selling point with Bradley Chubb on the contract with the minimum salary and drawing the parallel to Amari Cooper. So what could you get with this contract and this structure? And I think this was a good contract for Miami for sure, relative to what the contract was. It's a good example of making chicken salad out of chicken excrement. But right now, Bradley Chubb is playing 67% of the Dolphins' defensive snaps through the first 5 games. So he's on pace for $2.1 million in playtime incentives, and never mind what he's going to be on pace for from a sack incentive perspective. It'll probably be double that at a minimum. I don't know that he'll get 11. He can make this interesting here if he keeps this up for another couple weeks, though. Is that 2 more, and he's going to cash $1.225 million. I think you're probably looking at a pick swap. I mean, Joe Flacco just got traded in the division from the Browns to the Bengals as they try to pick up the pieces without Joe Burrow and save their season, as Jake Browning turns into the pumpkin that everybody with a set of eyeballs knew that he was, with the exception of the first 3 games he played in spite of Joe Burrow the last time Joe Burrow missed time. And that was a 5 and a 6 pick swap. Could you get something potentially similar for Bradley Chubb? Maybe. Potentially. If the Dolphins would commit to eating some money, I could maybe see them getting like a 5. Just outright. But they'd have to eat potentially a majority of the incentive money to get that. Because again, Bradley Chubb is owed $43.5 million over the next 2 seasons in 26 and 27. None of it's guaranteed. Nobody's going to bring Bradley Chubb in and pay him to play on that dollar amount as a 30-year-old pass rusher. You know, they might try to renegotiate and knock it down, or they could very easily cut him and say, hey, we want to bring you back, but we want to redo a contract without all this other stuff that another team signed you up for. But as soon as that contract gets cut off, like that's the expiration date on the value for a negotiation for a trade, to say, look, we're going to cut him out to the end of the season. So it makes it hard. But getting out in front of it, potentially saving a few $1 million, especially if you're saving some of the incentive dollars off of this. Freeing yourself up for Chop Robinson to play more snaps. And I know he hasn't been great against the run in the first couple weeks of the season, and I understand that. But Chop Robinson's a first-round pick from 2024. Like Kenneth Grant, like Jonas Savaianaya, like Jordan Phillips, like Dante Trader, like Ollie Gordon, all these guys, they got to play to get better. And we want to play, and we want to evaluate, and we want to figure out who they are, and we got to figure out what we have in these guys. Whether it's for Mike McDaniel or a different coach or Chris Greer or a different GM, whoever. They need to play, period. So to sit here and let Bradley Chubb inch closer to a bunch of incentive dollars at the expense of Chop Robinson playing 32% of the snaps, it doesn't make sense to me. It's one I'd be starting working on now, because I do think there's some negotiations on who's taking what with the rest of that contract that necessitates that. My brain got broke today. We're going to talk about that, courtesy of Sumer Sports and a new AI tool that they put out that is really changing the way that I'm able to process what the Dolphins are doing thanks to some of their tools. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Dolphins. Some of my early Dolphins observations with the Dolphins run game, courtesy of Sumer Brain. We're getting into that next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence in every ride with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how they craft every model. You can feel the Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to the available Nappa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you could drive with confidence through almost any season, including football season. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Yeah, this tool, it's like a high-end analytics tool with like a Chat GPT interface built into it, where you could put inquiries into it and with a bunch of filters. Like, for example, I wanted to know, what is the Dolphins' EPA per rush and success rate split when running the football with and without pre-snap motion in 2025? It gave me that answer. I have that answer. We're going to talk about that answer. But then I took it a layer further. I went into real sicko mode. I said, can you split this information by gap and zone run concepts and what gaps these runs are designed to hit? Sure enough, inside zone, outside zone, pull lead, power, man, counter, trap, trick rushes, and directions, left and right, all with the split of whether they're being run with or without motion before the snap. Then I say, can you pull this exact data for 2024? Sure enough, I got it. And wow, we got some numbers here. So first and foremost, what is EPA? For those of you who maybe lay to the dreaded analytics, right? And I'm not a super big analytics snob, but I do believe that contextualized information can greatly help your understanding of why things are or are not working. And the more information you have, as long as you don't let one piece of the information rule your opinion, it can be very helpful. Because I have opinions based on run snap motion that I believed before I pulled this data set. What is EPA? Expected points added is a metrics in football analytics that evaluates the impact of every play on a team's likelihood of scoring. It assigns a point value to every play by comparing the team's expected points before and after the play, by factoring in things like down, distance, and field position, providing a more nuanced assessment than traditional statistics. For example, a 5-yard gain on 3rd and 3 is more valuable than the same yardage gain on 3rd and 10 because it results in a first down and extends the drive. EPA captures these differences, offering insights into play effectiveness and player contributions. That's EPA. That's what it is. So the first thing I asked this Sumer Brain tool that came out this afternoon about the Dolphins offense, what is the EPA rush and success rate splits when running the football with and without pre-snap motion? The Dolphins incrementally are running the football better with motion in 2025 than they are without motion at the snap. That's a surprise. That was a surprising figure for me. I would have not have guessed that to be true, but it's then when you compound it with what kind of run concepts are you doing it with that got me to where I felt my eyes were before I pulled the data. The Dolphins thus far this season are horrendous running outside zone. Through the first 5 games, the Dolphins have a negative 0.4 EPA per rush on outside zone with motion. Now, that's only a handful of snaps. It's not a very large amount. But when they run outside zone without motion, and that's 31 snaps, That's 31 reps of outside zone without motion, according to Sumer Sports, through the first 5 games of the season. It's still minus 0.2 EPA per rush. So to put that differently, every 5 times the Dolphins run outside zone, they lose a point in a game per EPA calculations. Every 2.5 times they run EPA or they run outside zone with motion, every 2.5 times they do it, they lose 1 point versus the expectation from where they are snapping the ball and the conditions in which they are snapping the ball. That's how far below expectations they are performing. Hence, it's called expected points added. It's kind of like that Pro Football Focus +2, -2 thing that we did for film study last year, where you watch every play, and if you perform to expectation, you get a 0, right? You performed exactly as expected. But if you go above expectation, you're in the positive. You're making positive contributions versus the standard expectation of the play, and vice versa. If you're under expect, if you lose 5 yards in the red zone on 1st and 10, that is going to yield a lot of negative outcomes and negative trickle-down effects for the rest of your drive, and probably going to take points off the board. It's going to hurt you a lot. What was the most surprising thing to me is where the Dolphins are finding their successful runs, because they have a success rate of 25% on outside zone runs without motion, and they have a 0% success rate on outside zone runs with motion. They're a horrible team running outside zone per these numbers right now. Inside zone, 20 inside zone reps thus far this season without motion at the snap. Their success rate's almost 50%. Their EPA is positive 0.1. So to contrast that, for every 2 snaps that if you win outside zone with motion versus inside zone without motion, if you did that 2 more times when you were going to call the outside zone stuff and you instead chose to run inside zone without motion, you'd add an extra point, expected point, based on how successful those plays are. A lot of their positive runs are some of the lead stuff. I mean, they've only ran a handful of like lead or pull lead run concepts. They've crushed on those. They've had a lot of success there. The other thing it did is it gave me by direction. And this was the eye-opening one for me. The Dolphins, per this data set, 52 runs to the left thus far this season. We heard all preseason about how good the left side of the offensive line was blocking. The success rate to the left-hand side, both the EPAs with and without motion to the left were negative. They've run 33 times to the right thus far this season, and those results were all positive versus expectation. The EPA to the left with motion was minus 0.27. The without motion, and this is 45 attempts, this is a pretty healthy sample size. Without motion running to the left was minus 0.11 EPA per rush. Versus it was 0.004, so effectively 2 expectation when you ran right without motion. That was 28 snaps. It's a pretty decent amount. And when you ran right with motion, your EPA was 0.26. So motion helps you have higher EPA and success rate with motion at the snap when you run right, but when you run it to the left, your success rate is lower and your EPA is it's negative on both fronts. You contrast that to 2024, and the Dolphins were catastrophically bad running to the right. And that goes back to the why is Kendall Lamb not the starting right tackle? Well, last year, Kendall Lamb started the second half of the season. Their without motion runs to the right-hand side outside, minus 0.21 EPA. And then with motion, it was almost minus 1 whole point. That's how bad it was. So it's very eye-opening for me to see how poorly they've been able to run to the left with or without motion outside. How poorly the outside zone stuff is tracking versus the inside zone and some of the gap concepts. And that goes back to, again, the game against Carolina. Thought the best first down run you had was a right side counterplay out of pistol where you pulled the guard. You got 3 yards out of it. And if you had a better block at right tackle on that play, you probably get 6. Versus you run 8 times on first down against Carolina. 6 of them are to the left-hand side, and you get minus 10 yards before contact on those plays. And some of that is with motion, Nick Westbrook-Ikine trying to kick the defensive end, and Julian Hill gives a great setup and then releases up to the second level, and the defensive end sitting right there, and Nick Westbrook-Ikine runs right by him. So this is a very cool tool for me to go off the deep end with. And I nerded out here for the last 10 minutes, and I know a bunch of you guys probably turned it off when I stopped talking about Bradley Chubb and the trade deadline and kind of teased AI and teased analytics and teased DPA and Reddit definition and all that. Those of you who stuck it out, I appreciate you guys. I waited all year for football season. It's like that Denzel Washington meme. I'm leaving with something, right? So if this is what I'm leaving with, if I'm not leaving with Dolphins wins, I'm leaving with something. And that means we're going to geek out a little bit over some of the advanced data insights that we can provide that help further paint the pictures of what we believe to be true about where the Dolphins are and are not having success. It's pretty eye-opening. Run some more inside zone. Run some more lead concepts. Run some more gap concepts. Right? It was 3/4 of your runs against the Panthers were zone concepts. Run a few more gap concepts. That's what happens when a team wants to run a bunch of heavy-handed guys and they want to condense the inside gaps, right? Ask that center to take it down block, pull that guard around there, and take the tight end split flow and go GY counter and try to pop it out the other side. See what happens. Instead of just continuing to try to run outside zone to the left again and again and again. And maybe it'll work this time. And it didn't work. That's going to do it for us here today on the show. Kyle Krabs, you can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. I'll be back to talk to you all again tomorrow.